Hey everyone, Mr. Jeff again, and we're going to continue talking about, is there a God? And specifically, we're going to be looking in the New Answers book, number one. And it says, is there really a God? And specifically, it talks about design. And the question that they propose and they ask is, how do we recognize the evidence of intelligence? Intelligence is kind of shown through different types of design. People write books, people make things, they make cars, they make all kinds of things, and you can look at those and say, oh, somebody intelligent or some form of intelligence had to have created this. We look at stone tools, historically the Great Wall of China. Look at any major city and see the skyscrapers. Those things didn't just happen, and they just didn't happen by some average person either. It took a lot of intelligent design to create those things. And as we look around pretty much anywhere throughout the world, you can see design. Your book says that design is everywhere. It would never enter our minds that metal, left to itself, would eventually form into engines, transmissions, wheels, and all other intricate parts needed to produce an automobile. It took somebody to design that and make that and then create that. And design is one of those arguments that can be used to show that there's God, and we'll kind of get to that more as we go through this lesson. But we talked in a different lesson about the old-fashioned watch, and we want to talk about that a little bit more today. And it originally comes from a man named William Paley. And William Paley was a 18th century Anglican clergyman. And he was having a discussion in an open forum, and he was talking about the difference between a watch and a rock. And he said, you look at the rock, and it's just kind of there. But if you look at that old-fashioned watch, it has to have had some type of design. The watch must have had a maker that existed. And he continued to talk about the intricate parts and the different things and how there's no way it could have just came together on its own. It had to have somebody create the parts, put them together in a precise order, in a precise way, so that you could have that watch function as it was designed. He basically went on to say that just as the watch implied a watchmaker, so too does design in living things imply a designer. And so the watch must have had a designer, so the world must have a designer. And living things showed evidence of design. All living things, trees, flowers, plants, animals, humans, we all show signs of some form of design. And a lot of arguments say that only Christians will believe that there's design in humans and design in earth, and it's not just random things. But if you start looking at people who are atheists and non-Christians, you can find a lot of evidence from them too, as well, stating that there's design in the world. Specifically, just talking about design. So even non-Christians believe in design. Isaac Asimov was a anti-creationist, and he really pushed a lot of anti-creationist evidence and things. But he also believed that there was design in different things. And he says that in man is a 3-pound brain, which as far as we know is the most complex and orderly arrangement of matter in the universe. So he's showing just in the brain itself, there's so much design. It doesn't make any sense. And then we can go on to other people who talk about, it's Dr. Michael Denton. He was has a doctorate in molecular biology. And he goes on and talks about different things. There's a large quote in your book, but I want to just read part of it. It says, it would be an illusion to think that we are aware of at present is any more than a fraction of the full extent of biological design. In practically every field of fundamental biological research, ever-increasing levels of design and complexity are being revealed at an ever-accelerating rate. Basically, the more they get into biochemistry, the more they see there's some actual design there, and it's just getting more and more complex the deeper they dive into it. One of the most kind of well-known atheists is Dr. Richard Dawkins. He's a leading evolutionist. But even he says that we have seen that living things are too improbable and too beautifully designed to have come into existence by chance. So even he himself says there is design in the world, and even though he won't admit that there's a God, he admits that there's a design and in things of nature. So if Christians and atheists and non-Christians can all agree that there's some type of design, it leads us to the question of then who or what was the designer, right? If we can say that something has to be designed and created by that designer, then, and we can all agree that there was design in nature, then who or what was the designer? We as Christians say it's an easy answer, right? It's God. Non-Christians don't agree with that, obviously. They say it's the blind forces of physics or the process of natural selection. So, again, so we can be familiar with these and be able to argue against these when people bring this up to us. We first say, does natural selection produce design? Well, natural selection only operates on the information that is already contained in the genes that are present. It does not produce any new genes. And this is exactly what the Bible states, right? You can't get, a cow doesn't produce a bird, and a bird doesn't produce a snake, and anything like that. You only have the genes that are there, and you're only going to reproduce and be able to deal with what's inside those genes. Natural selection can show slow variety, but never no new information, okay? But what about mutations? Scientists love to talk about mutations. Oh, we have mutations in genes and mutations in things that happen, and that's true. We can show mutations. But mutations do not produce any new information. And that's proved by science. All point mutations that have been studied at a molecular level turn out to reduce the genetic information and not to increase it. So mutations do not work as a mechanism for the evolutionary process. Dr. Gitt is a director of professor at the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology, says mutations can only cause changes in existing information. It can't create new information, and it can only change the existing information. So, again, so we have other things. And the book talks about an airplane. And the book talks about that there's thousands of different pieces. There's 6 million different parts that create an airplane. 6 million different parts. Any one of those parts by themselves can't fly. But if you put all 6 million of those parts together in the proper way, in the proper order, in the proper design by an intelligent person, then that airplane is going to fly. Now, that can be a little concerning if you're sitting in an airplane at 5,000, 50,000 feet, and you're, I hope just one of those parts doesn't quite work out the wrong way, because we're going to have problems. But it shows that that's the design. And we use that example because when you start looking at the human body and biochemistry, there's thousands of different, what the scientists call biochemical machines in our body, things that sense light, sense sound, detect minor changes to different chemical levels of different proteins in your body and things. And all of these things have to properly function, just like those millions of parts on an airplane, to keep our body running properly. There's thousands of those biochemical machines in a single cell, and they must all function properly together to fly. So what does it mean? Quite simply, evolution from chemicals to a living system is impossible. If you have a fly flying around or a mosquito, and all of a sudden you smash that mosquito, you have all of its parts, but that mosquito is no longer alive. It can no longer fly because they're no longer in the proper order. It has to be created and designed in a proper way to be able to continue to work. Information cannot arise from disorder and chance. Okay, so we say there's design in the world. Everybody can agree with that. We say that where does that design come from? We just showed it doesn't come from natural selection, and it cannot mutate. It can't, get new information from existing information. So we talked about the different things. So then we want to say, so then what then is the source of this information? Where does it all come from? We can conclude that huge amounts of information in living things must originally have come from an intelligence which had to be superior than ours, right? It had to have somebody or something greater than us to be able to design us, to make us. If we have design and all these intricate parts, then something had to be that original designer. The origin of the designer must have always been there. And non-Christians have a hard time explaining that. They get stuck and they come up with all these theories. But for us Christians, we know that God is the foundation for science and reason. The Bible takes God's existence as a given. In the beginning, God. He was there at creation. He was there when everything was made. Him being there has always been. It's the given in the Bible. So only a biblical worldview can really account for the existence of science. Science depends on the fact that the universe obeys orderly laws which do not arbitrarily change. And we know, if we believe the Bible, that God does not change.